Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu. Welcome to Buddhism 123. Last week, we introduced the basics of Buddhism. It does fulfill all the basic characteristics of a religion. It has deep spiritual thought, and it's backed up by philosophy and deep philosophical reasoning. It conforms with humanistic and transpersonal or spiritual psychology. It's validated by science, and it shows the history of both evolutionary and geological history. Buddhism is also a way of life that's inspired by a spiritual source. And so it does fulfill all those things we ask about, whether it's a religion, a philosophy, and a way of life. When the Buddha was seeking truth, he looked around and observed everything on earth. And what he found were two truths. One, that everything is impermanent, that everything changes. And the second is that everything is interdependent. That is, everything is related to each other, and there's no separate entity that stands alone. Now, since everything is changing and impermanent, and it is in this dynamic flow, the most important time is now. And also, since everything is interdependent and connected, the most important thing is relationships. So Buddhism is becoming aware and placing ourselves in these two truths of impermanence and interdependence. Now, as we expand ourselves to be in line with these truths, we also want to expand our idea of ourself to include all others. So we find out that the me is actually the we. Now, at the Buddha's time, those who followed his teachings left their ordinary conventional life. They became monks and nuns and lived in a monastery. But what about us in modern life who have jobs and families? What are we to do? Well, the founder of this sect of Jodo Shinshu, or Shin Buddhism, was Shindan, who was a monk for 20 years. However, his integrity led him to admit that he was unable to let go of his ego attachments. And so he finally left the monastery and followed another teacher, Honen, who was starting a new type of Buddhism based on what's called the Nembutsu, and it was for ordinary people. And so I'd like to discuss how Shin Buddhism is just right for us right now, ordinary people in America. However, there are three areas that make it difficult for us to really appreciate Shin Buddhism. Now, the first is culture. There is a big difference between Eastern and Western culture. And so there is this difference that we have to be aware of. The second is time. Shinran and Honen lived in 13th century Japan. And even Renyo, his eighth descendant, lived in the 16th century. That was when everyone considered that the earth was flat. And now, in 21st century America, we live in a digital age where we're aware of the universe and the world is in a different place. The third difficulty of really appreciating Shin is the use of words, because words represent experience. And there's a confusion as to the meaning of words, such as if we use the word football, it means something for Americans, such as the 49ers or the Green Bay Packers. But for the rest of the world, football really means soccer. So words represent different experiences for different people throughout the world. Now, the most obvious difficulty of understanding Shin is that sometimes we look at it as Americans who have a background in the Western religion of Christianity. And so we compare some of these things. But we must say that Buddha was not a god. We know that things occur just because of causes and conditions. A second thing is that judgment is not really a problem. We are accepted just as we are. Judgment in the Western world often pits good over bad. Now, that's just the natural way we think. But this is the world of duality, which means that in order to have one, you must have another. Up needs a down, in needs an out. And so rather than looking at one side over another, which really doesn't have a resolution, we look at balance, the balance of two extremes. And another thing is that there's not an emphasis on the afterlife, that this life is not really just a prelude to an eternal afterlife. For a Buddhist, the life is a process, and it's not about the end. So, as a Buddhist, our practice is to develop our minds so that we can access this complete truth. But we realize that our minds have only a small portion of accessing the truth, true reality. Now, we can awaken to the same truth that monks and nuns study all their lives about. And so how can we do that? With our families and our commitments to our careers and our society. There's a simple process with which we're all familiar, and it's called the easy path of the Nembutsu. You will hear followers of Shin Buddhism recite the Nembutsu, Namo Amida Butsu, in all of our services and actually in daily life. Now, this is the essential practice of Shin Buddhists. And I have found that the most effective way of conveying this thought is that stating that Shin Buddhism is a religion of receiving. More specifically, it's becoming aware of what we have received. And so it's different than some religions in where we seem to have prayer or we're petitioning for something we don't have. We would like to see life in the way that it benefits us. The Nembutsu is not a prayer. It's an expression of gratitude. We don't want the universe to bend to our wishes. This is a small part of our minds thinking that the world is made for us to feel good. Because what if it does bend to our reality or the way we want things? What about others? And so you see, this small way of thinking is not really in line with true reality. Now, this ego self, it's not about eliminating the ego self. We maintain that, as Shinran discovered. But we put it in a different position. What we do is we appreciate what we have. Now, how do we make this shift? I have found that the most effective and simplest way is to use a method that we're all familiar with. We say thank you when we acknowledge a gift from others. Thank you is an expression used in all cultures, and it's been used for centuries of time, probably since civilization began. It has an experience of gratitude behind it. And this is one way of becoming familiar with Namo Amida Butsu, the easy path of Shin Buddhism. Now, I will give future talks on this Nembutsu and how this simple practice can lead not only to a happy ordinary life, but to the deep spiritual insight that it provides. True reality is what we're aligning ourselves with, and this simple act of beginning with the words of gratitude, practice on a daily basis, is a way to gain this. But thank you is just the opening gate of the Nembutsu. What it does is it bypasses all these questions we have, as I said earlier, of whether things are religion, whether it's good or bad, all these things. And the result is that it parallels the awakening that monks and nuns have studied for years. I think for a person who may sit in meditation for 10 years, it probably has a similar awakening. But the experience of the Nembutsu, Namo Amida Butsu, is much deeper and broader than thank you. It's the beginning step for Americans who have no background in Buddhism or Japanese culture. It takes us out of the thoughts of greed, ignorance, and hatred. So in terms of impermanence, saying thank you places us in the now. the present moment. In terms of interdependence, we realize the importance of relationships as we appreciate what others have done for us. When we say thank you, we feel harmony, we feel gratitude, peace, and joy. And so to summarize our short response to a question of what Shin Buddhism is about, we can say it's to appreciate what we have received, to balance the desire for things that we don't have. Now, during this COVID-19 pandemic, we have time to think about our lives and what our lives and our minds have been focused on. This virus represents illness caused by bacteria and viruses that has affected humans and animals probably since the time of our existence. But now, if we reflect on this thought of saying thank you, what is there to be thankful about? For most of us, as we're isolated in our homes, we do have homes. We have shelters that keep us warm and safe. We're able to eat. And for most of us, we're able to be protected and be clean. We have health care, scientists who are researching ways to protect ourselves from this virus. So this pandemic offers us an opportunity to stop and think about the basics. What is our life really about? And in Shin Buddhism, it is to reflect on all the things that have benefited us and has created our existence. And this gratitude to others is the basis of learning as a beginning step of the Nembutsu. Again, our future episodes will focus on the details of this as I expand on the breadth and depth of Namo Amida Butsu, the Nembutsu, our practice as Shin Buddhists. So let me close again with the recitation of this practice of appreciating what we have. Gassho, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu.